When you say that word victim, you're accepting the role. And I think once I figured out, no, I could have taken this collar off the whole time. I could have walked out of here any time. Now, mind you, some people are in situations with very abusive domestic situations. It's not as easy as just saying, yeah, I can walk out. It's sometimes safer to stay. But, that's a talk for another day. But yeah, I think it was just about realizing that I still had all those things inside of me that I wanted to do with my life. And I felt like if I stayed in that situation with him, life was just going to keep going as it had always, that hamster wheel. It had never changed and nothing was going to change. And I thought to myself, in 40 years, 50 years, when I'm on taking my last dying breath, is this what I want to have been my life? And it's not, but I couldn't have the life I wanted with a man that refused to allow me to experience joy, connections to other people, family and friends. I wasn't allowed family and friends. He had made sure to separate me from all of them. I certainly felt very alone. I thought he was the only one. He was all I had. And that's part of also why I held on for so long, because everyone else had left me behind. And it was just a really hard time where I just had to dig deep down and just say, is this what I want my life to be?
Today on The Beautiful Side of Grief, I want to explore the grief related to abuse, and more specifically, narcissistic abuse. If you have a close relationship with your family, think for a moment what that relationship would look like if they set you up for a lifetime of abuse when you were growing up and then into your adulthood. Instead of giving you the love and support you deserved, they chose to cover their own tracks from possible exposure, making you out to be the bad guy and supporting your abusive partner instead. Truly, it's enough to send anyone crazy. Having the courage to stand up for yourself and speak your truth becomes the death of your family and loved one. To all intents and purposes, you are a whistleblower, and that's an incredibly courageous, risky, and heartbreaking situation to be in. To find yourself, the trade-off is to lose your family. That is what victims of abuse typically encounter when they leave their abusive situations. And there are probably some of you listening right now who will be able to relate to this. So if you've been set up for this type of situation, how on earth do you go about extricating yourself? That is what Dana Diaz is going to share with us today. She is the author of Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse, detailing the many decades she endured this type of abuse. When she finally ended the cycle of abuse, she was exiled and ghosted by friends, family, acquaintances in her son's school, and in her church. That's a whole lot of grief to endure. She's going to take us through that, including how to identify some red flags for anyone who may be in a similar situation, where to go to for support, and why it's so important for anyone who is experiencing this type of abuse to find their way out. So a very warm welcome to you, Dana. Nice to have you on The Beautiful Side of Grief.
Thank you so much for having me. I have actually been on almost 200 podcasts, but I've never, ever, this is the first time that I'm going to be speaking specifically about that grief and that mourning that comes with all these wonderful things like breaking cycles and whistleblowing. It's a very brave thing to do, but there's so much loss that has to be reconciled with it. And it's devastating. It can devastate anybody. So thank you for having me on to speak about this.
Oh, I'm very privileged and grateful to have you here speaking about this, because I believe it's hidden in clear sight. There are so many people going through this. And the more we give a voice to it, the more that will empower people to break those cycles. But
Exactly.
firstly, I would like to begin this conversation with what your life looks like here and now with your husband, Doug.
I am so glad that you asked that because that's my happy ever after, is
Mhm.
that after 45 years of being abused by multiple people in multiple ways and suffering, and at some point not wanting to live life anymore, I'm happy. I'm so glad that I got through it all, number one, and that I'm still here. But most importantly, it's interesting that when I was 45, at that turning point, at that crossroad, I had asked myself simply, what do I want? And the interesting thing is, what I'd wanted in the grand scheme of my life had been the same thing that I'd wanted when I was 18, 19 years old and hopeful. I wanted to be a writer. That's why I went to school for journalism. Since 12 years old, I wanted to advocate for victims of abuse because I was an abused child. I minored in psychology thinking I would do something. Now I am doing that. I have published a book. I have 2 more books coming out in the next year that I've already written. And I wanted to be married, just not to somebody that was abusive and in the end tried to kill me. And that I don't mean to be so off the cuff about it, but I'm in a beautiful, loving relationship. I never thought after all those years of mental and physical trauma, and with all the baggage that I came with, I never thought I could be in a healthy relationship. I was one of those people that said, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I have to go be alone, so I'm not a bother or burden to anybody. Yet here, this man who I'd known for many years, I'd known his family 20 years, he was there all along. And just at the right time, life brought us together and opened my eyes like, oh, where have you been all my life? You've been right there. But he was that crutch. I'm not saying to rely on people is necessary for healing, but I think I needed a little help getting back up on my feet. So he was that crutch, that the positive person, the encourager, the support that I needed till I could walk on my own again and relearn myself and rediscover who I was. So it's been a beautiful thing, but literally everything I'd ever wanted, like I said, from 30 some years ago, everything that had been in my heart has come to fruition in the 3.5 short years since I finally released myself from all those toxic people and those abusive relationships. And it's a very short time for anybody to do all these things, but it happened. It's like a Cinderella story, but I'm just so glad that I'm in a position now where I can reach back and help others to get up to where I am because it's not fun to be down in that rabbit hole.
Congratulations, firstly, on finding your happy ever after. That's so
Thank you.
important. But I think the other thing that's really important about what you've just said is that you're giving people hope that they too can go from the
Yes.
situation that they are currently in to finding their own version of happy ever after. And I think that is so important. We need that hope, and everybody needs a glimmer of light. And so that's what we're going to take people through today because they can get an understanding of where you were at. Before we go into the background of your narcissistic abuse, are you able to define for us just what that is? What is narcissistic abuse?
Yes. So there's a few different facets I'll cover here. Narcissistic abuse is when a narcissist abuses you. It's not a specific sort of abuse per se because it encompasses any and all forms of abuse. So victims of narcissistic abuse might experience just one or a few of types of abuse or all, including physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse, legal abuse, financial abuse, throw in the gaslighting, manipulation, silent treatment, whatever tactic they can use to diminish you, overpower you, control you, and basically make you dependent on them for your every thought and your every action. That is what they will do. And I always say I liken it to tumors because I don't want to say that all narcissists are abusive. There are some narcissists who are true to the word. Narcissus was a Greek god who liked to look at his reflection in the water because he was so handsome, I guess. And we see these people on social media taking all their selfies, and God love them, they really do look as good as they think they do. But those aren't the narcissists bothering us. So I liken those to like benign tumors in your body. They're there, they're not bothering you. But on the other hand, there's malignant tumors, right?
Yep.
Malignant tumors cause you problems. They might even kill you. And these are the narcissists that are abusive. These are the narcissists that anyone who watches these true crime shows, 9 times out of 10, I look at my husband and say, dare I say the N word? To me, that the N word's a narcissist. So, it's actually a very scary thing. And just to give people some perspective on how common this is, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are in an abusive relationship with a narcissist. That's pretty
Wow.
scary.
That is.
Even scarier is 38% of all women murdered, all women, 38% are murdered by their partner. That's scary. That makes me want to not be in a relationship if I'm a woman. I mean, let's consider that. That's a very scary thought. So this is something that needs to be taken seriously. But unfortunately, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I've talked to people in the UK, in Australia, here in the US. Unless you have the black eyes or you have bullet holes in your body, you don't get justice. You don't get. I had to fight for an order of protection after guns and knives came into the situation. So it's something you really just need to you need to take care of yourself in this. But I think as a collective society, we need to watch out for each other because sadly,
Yeah.
now that I'm out of the situation, there have been people that have come forward that said, oh, I kind of suspected or I thought you were good, but they never did anything. And I'm not exaggerating, I could be dead right now by the hands of 2 different narcissists. As a matter of fact, not just one. To talk about looking over my shoulder all my life, it's a very real possibility that I could have been one of those statistics, but I'm still here because people need to know what this is about. People need to see what this looks like because the narcissists, yes, they're out in society, they're wearing the mask, they're volunteering and looking charitable and generous, and they're coaching the children's sports and they're volunteering at church and everybody loves them and they're so funny and they're charming and they're respectable. But boy, if they get mad, if something doesn't go their way, if you are the person that they have decided is going to take the brunt of that, you better watch out. You better watch out because it's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing, and you never know what you're going to get.
I want to take a look now at what sets us up for allowing ourselves to be in this type of situation and relationship and that. So take us back, Dana, if you wouldn't mind, to where it all started for you with your family and what sort of things were happening in your upbringing that would lead you to accepting an abusive relationship for so long or relationships for so long.
Yeah, of course. This is actually what my second book is about that will be coming out
Great.
later this summer. It's about my growing up because I think that most people I've talked to that are in toxic relationships as adults certainly went through something as children because let's be real. I look at my biological father, he married somebody, not my mother, and had children. And I look at my sister and she was raised with the way a girl should be, with the love and support of her parents, with encouragement, taught to have self-respect and self-esteem. She is I'm so happy for her and her husband. They are a match made in heaven. She is not the type of person that would have tolerated 1 minute of my ex-husband. Me, it was a little different. I was a teenage pregnancy. My mother certainly didn't want me, and I didn't grow on her as I was growing in her belly. So the odds were stacked against me before I even got here. So I'm born to a teenage mother that doesn't want me. In fact, I don't think she wanted children because right after I was born, she had her fallopian tubes tied so she couldn't have any more children. Yes, they did that back in the 70s. At that young age, as a teenager, she had her tubes tied. So that speaks volumes in itself. So I lived with my great grandma because she was the one that was home. Grandma decided she would work and pay for everything for me. So my mother was basically relieved of me. I wasn't going to burden her or bother her with her life. However, because she had been a pregnant teenager during a time when that wasn't acceptable, she went through, I will never hear the end of all the shame and ridicule and judgment she endured. And I don't dismiss that. I'm sure it was very difficult. But the problem came in is that even as far back as I can remember as a little girl, she put that shame on me. She was always very emotionally neglectful of me, physically distant from me, wanted to make sure that I knew I was the reason she had suffered in whatever ways she suffered. And I'm sorry for that, but you don't put that on a child. And unfortunately, when I was around 4 or 5 years old, she found the man that she decided to marry, a much older man. The first time I met him, I didn't like him. He tried to give me a stuffed animal. I threw it back at him. There was something about him.
Mhm.
I was just a kid, but he repulsed me. And I mean, repulsed me. He just was vile to me. But that's who Mom married. When I was 7 years old, they got married. He moved us, of course, typical narcissistic move. They like to move you away from all your family and friends just so they can isolate you and have you all to themselves. So we were moved out of the city of Chicago, out to the suburbs, upper middle class, mainly Caucasian. We were Hispanic, or we are Hispanic, Puerto Rican. So she was telling me, stop rolling your R's. She was straightening my hair. She was putting me in Gap clothes instead of the frilly floral stuff Grandma was buying for me. I had to be white is basically what I had to be and stop being Hispanic. And I wasn't supposed to tell anyone we were Puerto Rican. And she even went so far as to change my last name from Diaz to his last name, which had no resemblance to anything Hispanic. So it's very interesting how she was showing me from a young age to basically deny myself and indicating in all those nonverbal ways that what we were wasn't enough. We had to be something else to fit in. We had to conform. It wasn't okay to be who we were. And I have my issues with that, obviously, because now I'm just blooming in the full glory of everything that I am, the good and the bad. The problem with my childhood and what really set me up. So now I just set that up with my mother because now I'm feeling deficient and I don't fit in anywhere. And at school, again, you have to remember it was the 70s. They were calling me illegitimate. And my mom said, I can't play with you because you're a bastard child. It was rough. It was rough. So I felt alone and isolated and I was withdrawn and I didn't know where I did fit. And I didn't even fit in at home because my mother mainly charged her new husband with getting me ready in the morning and getting me to school and all that because she had pawned me off to grandma and great grandma. Now she's pawning me off to this man. Well, this man, I didn't know what a narcissist was, but let me tell you, he's the king of all of them. He's one of these people, everybody knows them, that brags about, look at what I have. Look at my shiny new car. You'll never have a house like this. Look at my fancy watch. I have all this brand name. He's one of those. And if the neighbor gets a TV, he's got to buy one that's 2 inches bigger just so he can say he has the biggest and the best. It was annoying. I mean, annoying, even as a kid, to watch this. But with me, behind closed doors, he was just a nasty monster. He would tell me almost every single day that he shouldn't have to pay for another man's child, that my mother didn't love me. He would criticize if I was making toast for breakfast, that the toast is going to make me fat, that I'm going to get wide hips like a middle-aged woman. I shouldn't eat that spaghetti that my mother made for dinner because then I'm going to get fat and nobody's going to want me. So now I'm getting an eating disorder. It goes on and on. If I got on honor roll, I wasn't the valedictorian. It was never enough. I played viola, but I wasn't just in one orchestra. I was in 2 orchestras and I was in first chair, but it wasn't enough. I taught myself to play piano. I was composing my own classical music. You don't need to take lessons anymore. It was like nothing I could do would ever be enough. And to this day, I'm 48 years old. Neither my mother nor stepfather ever once in my entire life told me they were proud of me for anything. However, what was I as a child? What did they make me into? I was love-starved. I was obviously a people-pleasing, approval-seeking, codependent, desperate for any crumb of affection or attention. So when I left that house at 18 saying nobody's ever going to treat me that way again, and I didn't even go into the physical abuse because honestly, I've been strangled, thrown downstairs. There was a lot of slapping and beating me with a phone and stuff that happened, but that verbal abuse, that's what affected me. All that other stuff healed, but that verbal abuse, it sent me out in the world looking for basically the same thing. I knew it was wrong and I knew I deserved better, but when somebody came along and was aloof and arrogant and wanted servitude and felt entitled to treat me however he wanted because the rules didn't apply to him, it was familiar. And at least with my ex, the difference is that he's what we call a covert narcissist. The covert narcissist actually does love you sometimes. It's just the times that they don't, it it gets really bad. Because in my childhood, and I think that's what caught me off guard there, because it's not that I didn't see the red flags. It's not that I didn't sense that, ooh, I don't like this guy. He reminded me very much of my stepfather, but my stepfather just didn't like me. He didn't even try to. Whereas my ex, it was that same thing I said before. Sometimes he loved me. He'd caress my cheek sweetly when we'd watch TV, and it was the 2 of us against the world. But boy, if he didn't get something he wanted, or if I did something he didn't disapprove of, things were flying, doors were slamming, knives were being pulled out. It was very dicey, and it became a problem, obviously.
Real Jekyll and Hyde material, isn't it? I want to have a chat with you about your perception of love at that time, because all you knew was a really dysfunctional version of love, wasn't it? And that's what you were searching for.
Yeah.
So you thought you could find it in the same dysfunctional picture, didn't you?
Yes. And what's worse is that all the times that I went to my mother, from the time I was little all the way up through my teenage years, when I just finally gave up because I knew she wasn't going to do anything, so often she would tell me, well, he gets so angry with you because he loves you so much.
So anger and
Ow.
love.
Eek. But it's because her father was a narcissistic drunk who put her in the bathtub when she was a little girl and put a gun to her head. He would bring women home from the bar and have sex with them in my grandma and grandpa's living room, and my grandma would walk in and find her husband having sex with other women there all the time. They came out of a situation where my mother, and she would actually tell me this, my mother was like, I don't know why you think you have it so bad. You have it better than I did. So to her, it was a comparison. It was, well, he didn't put a gun to your head. He's not an alcoholic. So I'm just supposed to take the beatings. It's okay to go to school with hand marks on my neck because I was strangled. It's not okay. None of this is okay. But she didn't want to hear it. She did what I call enable, excuse, and tolerate. She enabled it by excusing it and tolerating it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the excusing it was oh, well, it's you. If you didn't provoke him, if you didn't lie about these things, if you didn't make him mad by telling such atrocious lies, I wasn't lying.
Yeah.
It's you. We're going to have to get you therapy now because you need to see somebody about all this lying. And that's another thing they do is they turn it on you and make you feel like you're the problem. So yeah, it's dicey. I've been through a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, I understand that completely because I went through it in a completely different way, but the results were the same, and that I grew up and allowed myself to be in these dreadful relationships that, where I was stalked and all those types of things
Wow.
because you don't think you deserve any better. And so
Right.
you put up with crap, absolute crap.
Yeah.
And like you say, that you hold on to those times where they do tell you that you're wonderful and special and I love you and like that. And you think, oh, they do. But then 2/3 of the rest of the time, they've just been absolutely
Exactly.
dreadful to you. You had inklings like I did right from an early age that what you were experiencing wasn't right, but you
Yeah.
kept succumbing to it. So you got engaged to Darren, even though you knew that it was like the house he was after and your contribution financially to get there, rather than
No.
him actually loving you. And the behaviors, you were making excuses, even though you knew in your heart of heart that what you were doing was wrong. So
Yeah.
explain that dynamic with us, because that's like that real having masks on, taking them off, having them on, taking them off. So can you just run through it?
Oh,
What
yeah.
that would like?
Absolutely. Narcissists, these abusive narcissists, and let's be clear again that these are the ones I'm talking about. You are a utility to them. You are a resource. They want something from you. It's just that they know how to play you. They figure you out really quick. I feel like they even have some spidey sense to know that you're vulnerable. I don't know what we emit in our nonverbal communication that says, come to me. I'm a little bird with a broken wing and I need you to save me. And so they act like that they're Prince Charming or Snow White or what, because this happens to men too. And they're perfect and wonderful. They say everything that you need to hear. They do everything you need them to do as long as you go along with their end agenda, basically. But they always have a self-serving agenda. And that's the issue. Yes, in my case, as I talked about in the book, my ex-husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but he was from day one always talking about he wanted to get a house. He wanted a condo. He was trying to keep up with his sister because his sister, who was 4 years older, already had a condo and she already had this car and she was getting married and all this stuff. And he was eager, strangely, he was eager to seek his own parents' approval. So he wanted to keep up with her and do the same things to get that approval from their parents. But he couldn't do it on his own. He had tried and he didn't have enough money. He didn't make enough money. But here I was, I'm going to college. I'm working full time. I'm working part time. I have my own apartment. I bought my own car. I am making my way in this world, fighting through, because when you leave home at 18 and you're that young and parents are cutting you off, you're done. It's a sink or swim situation. And I was fighting for what I wanted. And I think he saw that in me. I think he saw that I don't make enough money on my own. I can't this. And I think there was also this sense, and I think I touched upon this a little bit in my first time I hung out with him, but I could tell the first time I talked to him that he had a chip on his shoulder about the
Yes.
way he'd been
Yes.
treated by girls in the past. And the past, we were so young. I was 19. Even recently, before meeting me, there was a girl that he came to find that he'd known before in high school that had previously been like, you're not good enough for me. You're not my type. And then all of a sudden she saw him and said, oh, now you're handsome. Now you don't have buck teeth and you're not awkward and everything else. So he had this, I had a very clear sense, and forgive me because I'm not conceited in any way, but to him, he would always make this thing out about that I'm beautiful. He would always call me beautiful too. That his beautiful girlfriend, his beautiful wife. So I was like a trophy to him. I was like that FU to everybody in
Yeah.
his past. Oh, you all said no to me, but look at what I got now. So I just felt like for him, he saw me as his redemption in a
Yeah.
lot of ways and to get what he wanted. But that's what a lot of narcissists do. And looking back, when I realized what kind of a situation I was in, I saw this in my mother's marriage too. The narcissist she's married to, they started a business together, and I'm using quotes with my fingers because while she would wake up every single day from 3 a.m. and work until even if she had to work 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, go into work on Saturdays, sometimes even Sundays. She never took a break. All she did was work. He was out, having lunch here and working out at the gym for 3 hours there and gallivanting and buying Corvettes and fancy things. But they ran a business together. No, my mother ran a business. My mother is still working that business to this day, and he is still reaping the benefit. She chooses it. Unfortunately, I sensed it. I still just, I was so desperate. I'm just going to say the word. I was so desperate, though, to have that love, that sometimes love. It was unfortunately enough for me. And then you add in that his parents were the loveliest people you could ever meet. I absolutely adored. And his grandma and grandpa were even, but they were the family that I'd so desperately wanted. They were the parents, and they treated me just perfectly well. They absolutely adored me just the same. So I figured, we all have to make a little sacrifice, right? So my sacrifice to have this life that I thought I'd have with this family I wanted and these parents and all this and the sometimes love, it was going to be okay. And when I honestly, rationally, even when we got married, I cringe because I'll never forget walking down the aisle towards him in my wedding dress with 100-some people. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? We don't
Yeah.
belong together. We're going to get divorced. Why are we getting married? But I didn't turn around. I didn't stop it. In fact, I had 2 aunts that came up to me at the reception. You stand there and everybody comes in and greets you and congratulates. And they said, boy, we didn't think you were going to go through with it. We thought you were going to be a runaway bride. And I couldn't deny that I wished I had the courage to do that, but I didn't. I married him. And it's sad what you do for love. And I've gotten criticism and shame and judgment for it, being so open about it. But at the end of the day, we all have our thing and none of us are perfect. And it
Yeah.
doesn't make me a bad person that I was hopeful that at that young age that maybe by the time he's in his 40s or 50s, as we grow older, he'll mature. He'll learn to love me more. He'll become less aggressive. I had all these ideas in my head that things would be different. But unfortunately, at the end of that 25 years, he was still that 19-year-old frat boy that I'd met that would carry on with whatever woman he wanted, regardless of our legal connection to each other and regardless of our son. And he would squander and spend every penny I made before I even spent it or before I earned it. And it's a cycle. I think I refer in the book, I felt like a hamster just running, trying to get either move forward and make progress with him or try to escape. I wasn't even sure which at the time, but I always found myself in the same place and I was exhausted.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the red flags for our listeners that they should be looking out for, what you consider some of the key things, because like you say, you were busy justifying his behavior, saying, okay, they're going to get better later. If I just put up with them now, things will change. Well, that's one of them, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. When you find yourself excusing other people's behavior, That's an accommodating characteristic, and people pleasers like to accommodate
Oh,
because we don't want to inconvenience anyone with our opinions or feelings or, God forbid, our thoughts. They don't want to hear them. But that is a big one. And I always say my first red flag indicator, I always say, is not even about the other person. It's about us. It's our
yeah.
gut instinct. If your gut is just cringing at somebody,
Yeah.
you don't have to have a reason. And why we do it with ourselves. It's almost like gaslighting ourselves. We say, oh, I don't have a reason to feel this way. Why do I feel this way? They haven't done anything. They haven't. I don't care. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, at 48 years old, when I listen to my gut, it's usually a reason. And I usually find out later, and I'm usually glad for it. My great grandma used to say it's your guardian angel whispering in your ear. So, however you want to think about it, heed it and heed it very seriously, because I guarantee you, no matter if it's a person, a decision, a crossroad you're at, if you just listen to your gut instinct without thinking about it at all, you will go the right direction and make the right decision. And oftentimes it will steer you away from people you're probably better off without. So that's the first one. But really, there's a list I could go down of all these narcissistic tendencies and
Mm.
characteristics. The reality is everybody's got some, and I don't want to make anyone think they're a narcissist just because I always say
Yeah.
it's like going to the doctor with the sniffles and a sore throat. Lord, it could be COVID, it could be bronchitis, it could be, so we don't want to diagnose somebody with a few characteristics. But two things that I say are absolutely narcissist or not, even if you don't believe in narcissism, because some people don't. If somebody demeans, diminishes, insults you, the way they talk to you, boy, my ex used to call me an effing see you next Tuesday. Nasty. He called me that so much, it didn't even faze me anymore by the end. It was like calling me by my name. You don't speak to somebody you love and respect with those vulgar words. That's not okay. Now, forgive me for excusing a tiny bit of this, but we are all human. Something might flip out at some point, but it should be, there should be an apology afterwards, and it should never happen again. You don't speak to somebody you love and care about. So if somebody is speaking to you that way, or like diminishing you, insulting your intelligence, telling you're stupid, whatever, you're stupid to think that. Why would you? That's not okay. Because let me tell you, maybe that's not your person. It might not be what you want to hear, but there are other people out there that think everything you think, see, hear, everything about you is just fine. It's
Yeah.
just fine. That's just not your person, but it's not going to get any better. It doesn't matter how many I love yous they say. It doesn't matter how many gifts they buy you and how affectionate they are and how many times they sometimes seem to love you. That is not okay. That is not a person. People show you how they feel about you through their words and actions. So I love you doesn't mean much.
In a healthy relationship, Dana, would you consider being able to set boundaries for key things? Because I don't think
That is
you
key.
can set boundaries with narcissists, can you?
It's the thing. They dictate everything. But see, and this is where I talk about going from point A to point B. The boundaries were the key. I didn't have any because
Mm.
I would not say no to anyone for anything, because the last thing I ever wanted to do was disappoint somebody and have them displeased with me because of my childhood. So even though, because we all still have boundaries, but it was sad to me that in the beginning, it's like they start with little stuff. He got away with throwing this thing at me. Then he got away with locking me in a room. Then he got away with punching holes in the wall and taking doors off hinges. Then he got away with swinging a crowbar at my head. How do we get there? It's because they keep overstepping the bounds just a little bit more each time. And every time I say it's like gaining weight. 5 years ago, you weigh this. Today, you weigh this. And you're like, how did I put on that 10 pounds? Because it creeps on you. Just every bite of chocolate cake, every scoop of ice cream, every time you ate just a little too much at a family gathering. That's the same thing with narcissism. It's just a little worse every time something bad happened. And they got away with it. You didn't address it because it left you feeling unsettled and upset, but not enough that it's a deal breaker. You know how many times this man cheated on me and told me about it? He openly told me that he was doing things with other women. And I was like, okay. And they're the masters of pretending nothing happened. And if you bring anything up, that never happened. They never said that. They never did that. You're back to square one. You're never going to win. It's their show. And if you want to play a role in it like my mother does with her husband, then good for you. I hope you have a nice life. But no, that is not for me. I did not come here to be anybody's Stepford wife. I am me. I am a whole person with my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs, and they are valid. I just didn't know it for 45 years of my life.
Are you feeling lost, anxious, unsure of how to navigate the loss of your beautiful loved one? Don't know where to head next? Yeah, I get that. Then you may be interested in a letter of hope and aroha to help you find out who you are right here and now and how you can navigate that without being on that emotional roller coaster, feeling out of control. That's a feeling I really disliked after Tal and then Adrian died. So I've developed an 8-week support program where each week you get an email of what worked for me, as well as other tried and true tools to help with grief. It's a beautiful, calming, healing resource that I think you're really going to like and that you can use in your everyday life to find out what works for you and what doesn't. And the great thing is, you find yourself feeling stronger and more in control so you can work out what you want life to look like going forward. So if this sounds like something you would like to check out, head over to my website or check out the link in the episode notes. You're looking for a letter of hope and aroha. I want to read out something that you write in your book because I feel this is so important and so pivotal to that turning point. I had an epiphany. Darren wasn't the one who'd held me down all this time. I was. I had chosen subservience. Granted, I had my reasons, but I had even more reasons to choose to free myself of the bound I'd allowed Darren to impose on me. So I ripped off the hypothetical collar and leash and took back ownership of my life. Now, I think that's so very important because often we're looking to the external to change our reality. It comes back to us and us making that decision from within, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Share with us now, coming to that realization, what then was the journey to empowering yourself enough that you had the courage to eventually walk away from it?
That was about that point where I asked myself that question that I talked about earlier. What do I want? Because when you're in a lifetime with narcissists, nobody ever asked me what I want because they didn't care what I wanted. They only cared what they wanted. It wasn't about me at all. I was just there to serve some purpose. And when I did ask myself that very simple question, what do I want? I knew. And once you see that vision, once you know in your heart, because we all have those things, even if it's just one thing, we all have something in our hearts that just, it's, even if the fire has gone out, the embers are still there, the ashes, it's somewhere deep in there and it doesn't go away. There's something authentically unique about each and every one of us and something that just sits inside of us that we don't entertain. And I think that once I figured out that I had the power, I thought he was holding me there. I thought I'm a victim of abuse. When you say that word victim, you're accepting the role. And I think once I figured out, no, I could have taken this collar off the whole time. I could have walked out of here any time. Now, mind you, some people are in situations with very abusive domestic situations. It's not as easy as just saying, yeah, I can walk out. It's sometimes safer to stay. But, that's a talk for another day. But yeah, I think it was just about realizing that I still had all those things inside of me that I wanted to do with my life. And I felt like if I stayed in that situation with him, life was just going to keep going as it had always, that hamster wheel. It had never changed and nothing was going to change. And I thought to myself, in 40 years, 50 years, when I'm taking my last dying breath, is this what I want to have been my life? And it's not, but I couldn't have the life I wanted with a man that refused to allow me to experience joy, connections to other people, family and friends. I wasn't allowed family and friends. He had made sure to separate me from all of them. I certainly felt very alone. I thought he was the only one. He was all I had. And that's part of also why I held on for so long, because everyone else had left me behind. And it was just a really hard time where I just had to dig deep down and just say, is this what I want my life to be? No. So what do I want my life to be? These few things. I want to be married to somebody that loves me as much as I love them. I want to be a writer. I want to travel. He didn't like to travel. He didn't want me to be a writer because, God forbid, I have financial freedom or success or achievement or any sense of esteem and accomplishment. That wasn't okay. So I think once you realize that this person is not your person, at least not meant to be in your life in whatever capacity they're in your life at that moment in time, you just have to make that brave decision to step out of that role, to take a different role. There's other ways to live life that don't have to be, there's this old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. I didn't want any more of what I had.
Yeah.
I was done with it.
So how do you go from that situation to feeling worthy of what you really think you deserve and desire? Because that is a big gap. And not easy for a lot of people to step into, because you can have all these dreams and desires, but still feel like you're not worthy.
Oh, absolutely. So once I released myself of that relationship and all the burdens of it, the interesting thing happened and I love cliches, but they say you are who you associate with. In my childhood, I was raised, and I use the term loosely, by a mother and a stepfather who basically made sure I was the nothing they thought me to be. I never thought I could be more, so I'd never be more. I tried, but it was never enough. In my marriage, I feel like it was a lot of the same stuff. I was being dictated and told how things should be. But when I figured out that I had the power and that I could make the change, and I released myself of that, I went out in the world. And it's an interesting thing when you find that other people are telling you that they're proud of you, and other people are giving you compliments, and other people, like, I didn't know that people thought I was smart and that I was pretty and that I was really good at this and I could possibly do that. Again, I was limited, and I basically had a part of subscribing to my roles that I had been playing for so long was that I had internalized all these limiting beliefs. I had imposed them on myself. And it's almost a brainwashing that they do to you. But when that's all you constantly hear, how could you know any different? I've used this analogy before. I felt like at the end there, I felt like a flower in a garden. And I had all these weeds around me that were preventing me from getting sunshine. They were preventing me from getting the nourishment of the rain. These weeds were sucking all the nutrients out of the soil. So I was frail and weak and crumpling and not so pretty and just dying inside, but still there. But once we got to the point where when you cut off situations, when you cut off these relationships with narcissists and suddenly have boundaries and self-respect, it's amazing how they flee. So all these weeds started plucking themselves out of my garden. And as they were removing themselves, or in some cases, I had to remove them, I was getting sunshine. I was getting nourishment because they weren't sucking the nourishment and the nutrients from the soil. Then I was saying, oh, there's other flowers in this garden. There's other flowers that think I'm this beautiful, bright thing that they'd always been cheering me on. And they're telling me, grow, Dana, grow, be everything you can be. It's crazy, but then that's what happened. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that 3.5 years now since my divorce from Darren, that I have accomplished everything that my heart had wanted. Talk about a passion. We all have these things burning inside of us. Like I was bursting to be Dana and be me and be a human being, but I am the one who allowed myself to be somebody else for so long. I even refer to that as my old life, and this is my new life, or I'll say old Dana, and now this is new Dana, because it is literally but this is where that grief comes in, because all those weeds, as nasty as they were, my mother and stepfather haven't spoken to me in several years. So I had to go through my divorce alone. I had to get my son through the divorce, pretending to be okay and that it was going to be all right, just the two of us. But I had to do that alone without support. Then Darren's family. Of course, typical narcissist move. What do narcissists do? They tell everybody else how horrible you are. All the things they've done to you, they basically tell everybody you. So I harassed him. I stole his money. I cheated on him. He had all these things that he suddenly was telling everybody. So he was justified. And it was good that we weren't going to be together. But his family does not speak to me. And as a matter of fact, our son tells me that they absolutely hate me. That was my family for 25 years. They were my heart. They were half my reason for being with that man. And it was cold turkey. I got no resolution. I didn't get to go to my mother-in-law, who had been more of a mother to me than my own for 25 years, and even have an opportunity to tell her my side of the story, or just simply give her a hug and say, I'm sorry, I tried. I had to experience then with my mother and stepfather parting that most of my stepfather's family, he's an ass, but his family was good to me. And they were my aunts and uncles and cousins, literally exiled me. As a matter of fact, my favorite aunt called me to tell me, like, happy you divorced him, happy you're moving on. We really are thrilled for you. You're not part of this family anymore because it's disloyal for you to have a relationship with your biological father instead of your stepfather. And I'm like, I've had a relationship with my biological father since I was 16 years old. It's been 30, you're just punishing me now because he's coming to my wedding to Doug. And so now I lost another entire. And then the kicker on this, which is coming in my third book, I'm going to give a little juicy detail, is that Doug's family, my new husband, who I've known his family 20 years, is friends with his sister-in-law for about 16, 17 years before Doug and I even became a couple. And when we got engaged, she turned his entire family against me. Oh. She spread lies about me and actually had an intervention to stop him. She almost did stop the wedding. So now I lost his family too. when even our pastor was like, "Oh, you'll have the family that you've lost." So now I've lost my mom's family. There's still a few remaining there at least. My stepfather's family, my ex's family, and then Doug's. 4 entire families. Let me tell you, about, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks before my wedding to him, I was so distraught. I remember curling up in fetal position in the shower with a bottle of Malibu coconut rum. And I'm not saying drinking is the way, but I just wanted to drink the pain away because it's like everybody died. Everybody I'd ever known. Everybody I spent Christmases with and Easters with and went to barbecues and watched fireworks with on the 4th of July. Everybody was dead to me, yet they were still walking around. They were choosing to kill our relationships and to just dismiss me and banish me. And that hurts almost even more than death, I dare to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking dozens of people. It's a very, very lonely thing.
So how do you deal with that, Dana? Because I can see the impact of just even talking about this, and I understand it. Because no matter how your family treats you, they are still family. There is still connection there that you just can't divorce easily. But yeah, like you say, if you go downtown and you see somebody and they're just ghosting you, that hurts. That hurts inside, no matter how strong you're trying to be. How do you deal with that?
Well, I didn't deal with it very well. I cried a lot. I was very, very depressed for a long time. I was struggling just to function every day because it completely disabled me in so many ways to feel abandoned and rejected when I had had so much abandonment and rejection in my life already. But what saved me was, it was actually a very good friend of mine who happens to be a missionary priest from Africa, just one of the most intelligent and wise and amazing people I've ever met in my life. And we had dinner here at our house, and I was expressing all my pain to him, and he held my hand and he said, "Dana, you have this man, he loves you. You have a son that loves you." He says, "You and we're good friends. I love you. Your grandma loved," he started naming off, and maybe only a handful of people. But he's like, "Open your eyes. Your family is not necessarily your blood sometimes. It's not necessarily, your marital relations sometimes. Your family is just whoever is here and who's loving you and supporting you. And you have so many people." And I think we hear this, but we don't really feel it. And I didn't really feel it until then. Like I look now, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine. Ironically, he's a young man, not much older than my son. And it's honestly very strange, though he's but he's one of my very best friends in this whole world. We talk every single day. And we just had this conversation because he's watching his partner's grandma die. And, she's going through a rough time. And he said, "Who's going to be there for when it's my time?" Because he too had, some issues with being abandoned and rejected. And, I said, "Well, I'll be there for you." I said, "Unfortunately, I'm almost twice your age, so I may not be around." But I said, "I'll be with you in spirit. But God help me, if I'm still breathing on this earth, I will be next to you by your side. And I know you'll be by mine." The thing about it is that even if he was the only one by my side, that would be enough. Yeah. Because I could have, just like when we got married, yeah, okay, you can have 80 people. I could have had all those families that abandoned me there. For what? What quality does that give? We look at quantity versus quality. I'd rather have those few people, my ride or die people. Those are my family. Those are my family. And that's my friend. That's my husband. That's my son. I have a godmother in Florida, and I have a cousin, her son, that has always been like a brother to me, and we've reconnected, and I don't feel alone in this world anymore. But it's so strange that it's again this self-sabotage. You talk yourself into it. I've been accused of having toxic positivity, but I think it is all a matter of perspective. It is how you look at things, because how you talk to yourself and how you tell yourself are the way they're actually going to manifest in your life. So how I got through it is by replacing all those people who obviously didn't care about me as much as I cared about them, that they could so easily dismiss me, replacing them with people that showed up just because they did, because there was something about me that attracted them to me, to my spirit, and they weren't obligated. And I think if somebody loves you and they don't have an obligation to you, that's more than I could ever imagine deserving, but it's the most wonderful thing in the world.
I think people often say phrases like toxic positivity because they don't know how to relate to that feeling of being positive and attracting around you
Right.
people who are of the same ilk. And it's all about energy, isn't it? It's just like you said, right from
Yeah.
the outset, about trusting your intuition. Because when you've got the right people around you, because you feel that energy, you've found your tribe, you've found that group
Yeah,
of people, whether they're
exactly.
family, whether they're related to you or not, you've found them, and together you are supportive of each other. And for people from the outside looking in on that, they want to take that down because they're not feeling that. So that's often why they, use those terms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Dana, I realize the time. Do you have a little bit longer? I really want to explore with you the toll being in a bad relationship, toxic relationship took on your health, because
Oh, yeah.
that was major, and that nothing
Yeah.
else, that is a reason to get out of the relationship.
Yeah. And that was the motivator, actually. That's the interesting thing when we talk about why didn't I leave sooner? When I was writing my book, I looked back and I'm like, wow, I would be so sad if my daughter had a crowbar swung at her head or had a prescription medication incident where her partner dragged her body in the bathroom hoping she would die and just left her there. All these other awful things I should have left. But what actually made me realize this self-respect that I needed to say, okay, that's enough. I'm done. That deal breaker moment, it wasn't all the women he was carousing with. It was when my health declined. So what happened is it was around 2017 to 2018. I had started having just random symptoms and, things that most of us just ignore. It's terrible how we do that to ourselves. Like, oh, this has been bothering me for 3 weeks or 3 months, but it'll go away. Hopefully. I don't know what it is, but you don't explore it. You're busy living your life. You're just trying to get through. You deal with it. But then it was more and more. And it was such random things. To give people an idea, like I couldn't even connect them myself. There was no pattern or rhyme or reason. I'd always had a lot of stomach aches and headaches, always, even since childhood. But now, like, my hands were going numb. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and it was only ever my right arm would be completely asleep, where and not just asleep, but like dead weight, there was no blood rushing through it. I was having heart palpitations, shortness of breath, blurry vision, blacking out, muscle stiffness. This one was weird, like rigor mortis. If I sat for 10 minutes, if I was just sitting, I'd look like a 100-year-old lady trying to stand up. And to give people some perspective, yes, I was in my early 40s then, but I coached cross country for 9 years. I ran 5 miles every morning. I ate hard-boiled eggs and apples for lunch. I was one of those weirdos, those health nuts. I should have been in very physically good shape. I could not understand what was going on. Well, at the end of 2018, There was a terrible argument between me and my then husband. And it was no different than any other argument that we'd had. It was just another night, basically. You become so unfazed, it becomes your normal. But it's actually interesting. The only difference of that night, that was the night that in his drunken stupor, he admitted to me that he had told his family, his mother and his sister and his aunts and uncles, vicious lies about me. He said, because they like you better than they like me, so I took care of it. And I'm like, what did you tell them? And he said, I'm not going to tell you what I told them, but I told you I told them whatever I had to make them hate you. So he says, they're not going to talk to you anymore. And we were still married at this point, mind you. So after this whole podcast, you learn that I'm a little sensitive to family, dismissing me. He knew how to get me, though. He knew how to hurt me. And he couldn't, all these other awful things he did to me, I was still there. So how could he hurt me? He took his family away from me. And that within 2 weeks of that, because to say I was traumatized by that, I was so distraught. Within 2 weeks after that, I dropped to 93 pounds. I was probably 15 to 20 pounds heavier than the 93 pounds, but 93 skeletal pounds. At 44 years old, you should not be 93 pounds. It's not healthy. And everything else started to worsen. Like even when I'd go to tear toilet paper from the roll, my hands, they couldn't grasp the toilet paper to tear it. And I remember sitting on the toilet once crying, like, I can't even do basic things. I'm too young and I'm healthy. What is going on? Long and short of it, I started with the family doctor, go to this specialist, go to that. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. Some doctors threw their arms in the air and said, I don't know. You seem to have anxiety, go to a psychiatrist, or maybe you have some gastrointestinal stuff. Go to the heart doctor. Everybody wanted to throw a pill at me for the symptom. We'll try this. We'll try that. It'll make this better. And I was like, no, I don't need 20 pills. I need somebody to figure out what is going on and how this is all related. Finally get with a neurologist and a functional medicine doctor who put it all together. They got me with Mayo Clinic, premier medical, facility for the world, really. They did a cortisol test. Cortisol is a stress hormone that runs through your, sort of like, I always say it's like a sister hormone to adrenaline. When you're under a lot of stress, fight or flight mode, that cortisol runs through your body. Well, we did a cortisol test. Mayo Clinic says, well, we compromised the labs because there's no way they're this high, so we have to have you do it again. Did it again. They did a urine test as well. There's different ways they can test cortisol. They took 19 vials of my blood at one, which was daunting in itself. So they came back and they said, holy cow, your cortisol levels, cortisol should be between 1 and 600, depending on the time of day. Mine were 2,540 and up at all times of the day, including when they tested at midnight when I had to wake up from sleeping to do the cortisol test. When you're sleeping, theoretically, you should be at your lowest point of stress and calm. And even then, they said, what is going on? And I couldn't divulge everything because I was scared. When you're in that situation, the last thing you want to do is expose what's going on. You feel shame. You're worried they'll find out you said something. You'll suffer some consequence. So I kind of gave hints that I'm in a really bad situation, really volatile relationship. And I remember the doctor, this isn't even in gasping for air, but the one doctor said, you're living your whole life in fear. You're just afraid of everything and everyone. And I said, yes, actually I am. I am afraid constantly. She's like, you have been in fight or flight mode for most of your life, for decades. So what happened? All that cortisol, my white blood cells thought that they had to eradicate something, that I had some virus or cancer or some foreign substance that had to be eradicated. They killed themselves off. So all these random things going on in my body were autoimmune reactions. I had no idea stress could really do that to you. what was worse was they determined that I had a rare lung syndrome called upper airway resistance syndrome. The doctor says it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at one, and I had more of a tendency towards the fibromyalgia symptoms and feelings, and still do. But my oxygen saturation was falling below the COVID level. During COVID, they said if your oxygen was at 93% or lower, you probably had COVID. Mine was going down to 83%, to where I would get dizzy, I would get feverish, sweaty, and clammy, where I would literally be crawling for a chair, a bed, a couch, anything to just take in. I was so weak, and I had to have a backpack oxygen machine to help me breathe. And then what happened within 3 months of my diagnosis, we go into COVID, the shelter in place. So now the neurologist is calling me from home saying, a common cold can kill you right now. You cannot leave your house. You need to go. And unfortunately, I'm the sole breadwinner. I don't have much work because not many people were able to leave their houses to do any kind of work. But I had no choice. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Lose our house, not feed my son. I felt like I had to. And my then husband, unfortunately, had no care or concern whatsoever in the least. That is certainly depicted in Gasping for Air. He just wanted to make sure he had his house and his food and his things. And his words to me were, well, you better get to it. And honestly, looking back, he probably hoped that I would get COVID and die so that he could play the pitiful, poor me husband, the widower, with now a single father at my funeral and collect my life insurance. So it's a sad thing to be, that's one of the things that woke me up too. I think partially getting sick motivated me, made me realize that I didn't want to live this life with him anymore. But I think seeing that he didn't go to any doctor appointments with me, he didn't, when I told him my diagnosis, I mean, I don't even know how to express this to people. There was no emotion, no concern, no care whatsoever. He was more concerned that he was missing part of his television show, that I was interrupting him by sharing my diagnosis with him. He was missing his TV show. And that's so, you want to talk about demeaning and insulting. If that doesn't show you how somebody cares about you or truly feels about you, I don't know what does. So that was the time I woke up. That's what did it, was getting sick. But I do want people to caution that literally I go to my cliches. Stress can kill you.
Yeah.
That cortisol can cause a lot of problems. And one of the other things I have learned since that as a female is that your progesterone, which is one of those hormones that, when you get to a certain age that seems to be depleted, high cortisol depletes progesterone. I only depicted one miscarriage in Gasping for Air because the book was long enough. We couldn't put, there's things that I could still tell. I had so many miscarriages. I lost count.
Yeah.
But low progesterone caused by that high cortisol, it's something I've recently discovered. It messes your menstruation, your ability to conceive, your fertility. So then I'm suffering all of those losses on top of everything else.
Yeah.
It's a very nasty thing. So please, if this resonates, heed my example, because nobody needs to suffer like that. Life is hard enough without us choosing these terrible relationships, because they often don't get better, and they're not going to help you or serve your health in any way. And I want people to know this raspiness you hear in my voice. I'm 48 years old. I've never, ever smoked a cigarette. I've never smoked anything in my life. This is that lung disease. This is what you're hearing.
But you're actually looking pretty good now. So congratulations. And just share with us, because you're not on oxygen, you're not,
I'm not anymore.
And
This is the miracle. Thank you for reminding me. Within, I would say, a month or two
Mhm.
of my ex moving out, literally, I it I had energy, I had color in my face again. All those symptoms I had been experiencing just fell away like they were never there. Now, the oxygen and the stomach and headache stuff, it's still there once in a while, but yes, I have regained the weight. Although even that, it's kind of interesting. It took about 2.5 years for my nervous system to settle and kind of figure out, oh, okay, we are actually safe
Safe.
now. Like
Yeah.
we trust this to where it took me that long to be able to sleep through the night and to start gaining weight again. And now it just won't stop. Now you can barely wake me up in the morning. I'm a healthy, normal weight and I don't look like a Halloween decoration. So it is a very interesting thing to share with people, to be physical living proof that they don't have to put a hand on you to kill you. I'm also going to say this, it's just a little soapbox tangent. The people that say, let it go. I can't let this go because I'll have this the rest of my life, but I'm not going to be shamed by it and I'm not going to be defined by it, nor am I going to allow my circumstances to define who I am because I'm just Dana. Like you asked me in the beginning to introduce myself, I'm just me. It's not about me being a victim or a survivor or an author or a speaker or anything. I'm just a girl in this world that just wants love and wants to give love and wants to help other people. That's all it is. And whatever else comprises my life and my daily health and everything else, that's just who I am. Just like every one of us is their own unique individual person, but worthy and deserving of the same grace and love and respect that any of us are.
That's a blessing of being able to go through a journey such as this. What you've been through is that you can come out the other side and you're not wearing any mask. You are Dana, exactly who you are, how you present to the world. And that is the most beautiful thing. I think that's best outcome ever, just to be
Thank you.
totally authentically yourself. Hey, let's wrap up because we've just had this most
All right.
incredible conversation. And I am so grateful for you giving us this extra time.
Thank you.
What is the best thing that has happened to you so far today?
Today, I try to be grateful about things every day. Today, the thing I am most grateful, I think it's something I acknowledge every single day. When my husband comes home from work every day, I thank him and I tell him I appreciate him, that he supports me to the extent that he's willing to kind of take the load off of me, that he just wants me to write. I'm able to stay home with my 2 cats and finish up my 3rd book and be on podcasts and save the world, as he says. And I couldn't be doing this if I had to do what old Dana did, which was 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, work, gotta make money, gotta. He wants me to do what I'm doing because he loves me and he wants to make this happen for me. And he does every day. So for me, that's the thing every day when he comes home and I see his beautiful crystal blue eyes and his smile and I get his hug. And I literally every single day say, thank you. Thank you for letting me do what my heart's passion is. And it may not be something that makes money and it may not be something that people understand, but to say it's near and dear to my heart is an understatement. And the fact that he loved me so much and understands that and wants it for me is just something I would have never thought I'd ever have. So that's the greatest thing that I have today and every day, honestly, in this new life that I'm living.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And that is the absolute best because I can't imagine anything more perfect than being able to live your passion. And it's like when we go through this journey, I am compelled to do what I'm doing, to do this, to be a host of this podcast. to, put out resources that are going to help others in grief and to
Yes.
see grief from a different perspective. No, it's not something I chose, but it's something I'm driven by because I just know that I didn't experience this for no reason at all.
Yeah,
And so that's
exactly.
what we need to be. We need to be the voice for those who don't have their voice at this moment. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we want to give them the hope and belief that they can be the same or, just come into themselves and be deserving of being the best they can possibly
Exactly.
be. Yeah, exactly. When you have moments in your day that turn to custard that are not going so well, how do you pivot out of those?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of those, aren't there? Especially writing about my
Yeah.
past. I can sometimes go down those
Yeah.
nasty roads. So sometimes I just have to walk away. I think it's an understatement to say that I breathe, but sometimes you just have to just shut the screens. I will silence my phone, which people get so offended by, but sometimes I just need to shut everything down and just breathe and take a minute and just refocus because I think we get so caught up like everything. We try to be everything and do everything and force things that, sometimes maybe it's just I'm writing and it's just not, I can't get it out the way I'm trying to get it out. And I'm gushing about my husband. He has a beautiful property that we live on and he cut down the grass by the creek in the back. He calls it my river walk, but I'll sometimes just go back there. But there's something about just hearing the birds and hearing even the bugs and hearing the water and just, oh, breathe, refocus because all this noise of life is just noise. I've always told my son, life is not complicated. People make it complicated. And sometimes we just have to take a minute for ourselves. So when I get to those moments, I always feel like I just like click a reset button. So maybe I'll go for a walk, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. Just go for a walk, breathe the fresh air. If it's cruddy outside, you know what? My husband's the best. He'll make me a fire in the fireplace. I'll make
Oh,
myself and I'll just sit by the fire with my hot cocoa. It's just doing these little things that I say are deposit a little something in your happy jar. Whatever that little indulgence is, just do it. And sometimes it's just do your hair and makeup so that when you're looking in the mirror, you don't see the hobo you woke up with the shoveled hair and everything and the bags under the eyes. Sometimes I want to see something,
yeah.
and it makes you feel a little bit better. So it's just and it's kind of going back to the question, what do I want? Because usually in those moments, there is something you want. And a lot of times we just need a little love. And so we have to just give that little love and care to ourselves, but definitely take a moment to breathe and disconnect and kind of reconfigure your mind and your thinking. It's okay to walk away from life for a few minutes.
Gosh, I love breath. It's such a
Yes.
powerful rebalancer of our nervous system. And gosh, when anything gets a bit tough, I do exactly what you do. I do that
Yeah.
breathing and then I escape into nature. Just go for a
Yes,
walk
and
by
it
the water.
reduces cortisol. Yes, I love being by water.
Yeah.
But yes, breathing reduces cortisol in case anyone didn't know that. If
Yeah.
you are in a high cortisol moment,
Oh,
breathe.
yeah. Dana, oh my gosh. So I am very, very grateful for the time you have given us today to explain this very complex
Yeah,
topic because there's so many different nuances to it. And to be able to talk about it in such a way that other people can perhaps recognize that they're in that situation and then to know that they can get out of it and to have that hope and to see and hear about the life that you are living now. It just makes it all worthwhile. This is why I do this. It's because to have people like you show that there can be such beautiful things that can happen after the worst you've
yeah.
experienced in life. And so very grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so glad that hopefully this resonates with somebody. And I do encourage people to share if any of it resonates or connects in some way to somebody, please share this because it might help them see things in a different light.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. If there's a topic you'd like covered, click on the beautifulsideofgrief@gmail.com link, or go into the beautifulsideofgrief.com website, where you can also leave a review. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button. And if you know of somebody who could benefit from this episode, please share. And until next time, please be kind to you and take good care.